Okay, we're looking at part two here of Sumerian, Shinto, and biblical accounts that connect to each other. If you've watched the first part there, we talk about how in Nana, I guess one of the more important things is that the Nana story that goes on with this, that they correlate with this story, shows you that the tree that they designate as Dumuzi and his return of an evergreen tree, which we still do the symbology of today, and it talks about in the Bible about a Christmas tree where they chop down an evergreen tree and keep it indoors and do all this type of thing, that it's actually openly discussed as being there. And a lot of it comes from the Babylonian thing. Then we also find that this tree that they talk about serves two purposes and a dual purpose. It is a tree of life and a resurrection of Dumuzi and and it fulfills that role, along with a world tree role, which says that the roots of these trees reach the center of the earth and to the sky. But also, it's a tree of knowledge and wisdom, and Inanna, during her want for learning of sexual prowess before she becomes married, eats of the pine cone and the pine nuts that are in it as their symbolic meal before such, which recants the apple concept. I don't know if any people are aware, but apples don't come from there. If it's an apple, it comes from Europe. If it's not really an apple, it comes from somewhere else. And there is, of course, the love apple, which was called a mandrake plant because it looks kind of like a man. And mandrake. Drakes are dragons. I won't go there. I've done this a whole lot before with other things. We'll just look at this account here. And one thing I want to show you before we look at this and describe the first thing he's got going on, I want to show you a picture close up of Baal worship. See if it'll show up in there. This is Baal worship. Some of these statues were much, much huger than this. Supposedly there was one right around the edge of Carthage that was some 70 feet tall or something like that. Giant arms made of chains. And if you'll look at this, you can see him stoking a fire behind it, so it releases light out behind it there too. His eyes and his mouth, he's got horns, his arms are out, and they basically take their child, they put him on the arms, and this thing is brazen and red hot, and it flips it into its belly, and the children get killed in that, and it's called Sheol, and this is where the idea of hell and burning and the gnashing of teeth comes from. Okay? I can go into an in-depth one on that at a later date for y'all. I just want to have that in your mind so you can read this next part, and we'll continue from here. There's a lot to be revealed still. It says there is one God. Now this is from the Nihon Shoki, the Shinto. It says there is one God who dwells at the 8 crossroads of heaven, which is known in Sumerian as Nibiru, the length of whose nose is 7 hands, the length of whose back is more than 7 fathoms. Moreover, the light shines from his mouth and from his posteriors. His eyeballs are like an 8-hand mirror and have a ruddy glow like the akagachi. Now, this is supposedly a serpent that they have there that has red eyes that are in the area. And it has to do also with an ancient story of an 8-headed creature that has 8 tails and so on. But thereupon he sent one of his attendant deities to go and make inquiry. Now among the 80 myriads of deities, there was not one who would confront and make an inquiry. Before we continue, let's examine the description of the Sarhitu Akami a bit more closely. First, he is described as guarding the 8 crossroads of heaven, which means that he was the protector of sacred knowledge. Some claims that Sarhitu Akami is the ancestor relative of Tengu because of his long nose. His eyes have a red glow about them. Some have described the Tengu as Japanese gargoyles. And I've got a vid coming up on gargoyles. Just be a short one, but just to throw that in there, and gargoyles over time. Maybe this is how to show such a comparison is made. Now let us take a look at how Amino-Gaza Mikito's involvement with Okami first began. Then Nihon Shoki continues. Now among the 80 myriads of deities, there was not one who could confront him and make inquiry. Therefore he specially commanded Ami no Uzumi, saying, "Thou art superior to others in the power of thy looks. Thou hadst better go and question him. So Ami no Izumi forthwith bared breasts, and pushing down the band of her garment below her navel, confronted him with a mocking laugh. So this was kind of a come hither womanly kind of thing. You see what I'm saying? Where she comes up and she's like, eh, but anyhow, here we can see that Amini no Izumi Makito, like Dingir Anana, I just want to throw this in there. The kings, or the priest kings of Egypt, were known as Dingir. The priest kings of Egypt were known as Ingir. And people would say, oh, that's just the Semitic language that they're all connected. And you're like, yeah. That's kind of like how the Hebrews have this god, and they keep calling him El this and El that, but they're surrounded by a god of the Levant named El, or Elis, that the Greeks and everything talk about, that's of the Levant, that run the Levitical priests right there. And the Levitical priests aren't priests of just little Jerusalem or just those little people, but everywhere surrounding them. And El is the god in your Bible, and Tempel, and Angel, and Michael. Yeah, all that. They like to eat bagel. They pay with shekel. Anyhow, it's a big vicious circle. But somebody built a triangle called a pyramid. Let's leave that alone. Inanna, Ishtar, and Tammuz, she was used her looks as a form of military strategy. Now, this sounds like Cleopatra, along that line, but no, before Cleopatra, there was someone that had shown that idea. And before Inanna, we're talking about now, in the ancient Sumerians, it was Ninharsag, right? And then Semiramis was the one that became famous at doing it with Dumuzi and brought us about this whole concept that's here, right? Semiramis, it's a weird name. Half Ramses, half Ram, half Aries is the ram, half Aryan, half, let's just go on. Later, Shotoku Akami served as a protective guide during Ningo Makoto's descent into the earth and married Akimi no Makito. Now this really has to do with the same idea of the Greeks and how he goes and takes her into the underworld and stuff. He comes up out of the ground with his chariot and takes her down in the underworld. But then also this is reflected in the same idea of Inanna going to the underworld and getting Dumuzi, right? I don't know if you've seen my video on that, but there's a whole story and an epic that they have of doing this. And this is the idea of where spring comes from and why everything goes bad in the winters, because Dumuzi goes away to the underworld and then he comes back. Well, what's the underworld? Well, the underworld is, well, there's an equator, and then there's an underworld and there's an overworld, and the sun goes to the underworld. Well, what does that mean? Well, it's summer in the southern hemisphere when it's winter up here, and then it comes back. It rebounds on December 21st, but it stays still for 3 days. In this area, if you looked at it, or if you were able to see the constellation that it would come up into, it would say to be coming up into this sign of the Southern Cross. And therefore, this ancient story that was told was that the Son of God symbolically goes down 1 degree per year, and the Sumerians are the ones that figured out this degree, and this degree is based on this in 360 degrees. We still use this today. But it decays 1 degree per day, going down after the fall of man. It decays all the way down to December 21st, holds still, and then symbolically dies on the cross. 3 days later, it rises again to save all of mankind from the death of winter. But we have a very different view on that concept now, don't we? Having just gone through Christmas. But yet, it's the same. Now, Inanna, Ishtar, and Dumuzi, or Tammuz, are the ruling Dingir of the United States, this guy says, and it's featured in much of its history. The American flag has 50 stars, representing the 50 orgasms ministered to Dumuzi and the goddess Inanna. If you watch the last one, it talks about how he has to show his prowess. I'm not sure. There's one part there where it does, when you read the actual things, where it maybe think that maybe she got done 50 times. She had an orgasm 50 times, and that it showed his prowess in that way too. But we're not going to even go there today. Let's just leave that alone. It's still coffee time, people. These were later adopted to conform to make a male-dominated society, and the powers in these 50 orgasms became 50 names of Marduk, which is in the tablets, bestowed upon by him by the male gods for his prowess. Marduk replaced Dumuzi in the sacred marriage rite as the priesthood became the god, priesthood behind the god became more powerful. Now, blue is the color of Nebu, who was the son of Marduk and the scribe of the gods, who was responsible for decreeing fates. Red is the color of Nergal, and black, and the ruler of the underworld. And I got to throw this in here. Amazingly, all these cultures, Hindu, everybody, from Japan all the way through into Egypt, everywhere, death creatures are always seen as people that are painted black. There's a darkness and death to it. Well, it kind of makes sense. At nighttime you sleep, and the day you don't. So this sleep of death is marked by the darkness, and it's unknown, and light is knowledge and knowing. You don't know what's in the dark. You do know what's there when the light's out. It all bases off of simple little concepts like that, and just gets expounded upon, right? After, how long have we been doing this now? Well, it looks like we've been doing it for about 70,000 years. I'm serious when I say that. There has been a religious form to humanity for over 70,000 years, like before we were even Cro-Magnon. Right, okay, so the combination of the 13 red and white stripes appearing on the American flag symbolizes Ishtar's descent into the underworld, but also her ascent into heaven. 13 is the number of Lilith, or Lamashtu, which is considered to be the right hand of Ishtar, and she would be the 13th. Now, there used to be 13 zodiacs, too, and one of them has been taken out. Done a video on it, of course, and this is Ophiuchus. This is the giant snake that's got the man. So this is the symbol, and if you put that in this thing, I can literally go around the ancient Sumerian thing and show you the whole tale of everything. I can show you the biblical tale and how it goes around in a circle on an idea, something they can keep up with, and it's just zodiacal, people. It really is. It's that simple. And then they take people, and as above, so below. You see what I'm saying? And so they attach it to this and deify it and everything. It's really that simple. It's something I'm going to really show to you this year as we go through all of this. And that lucky 13, or is it unlucky? What? Well, Lilith isn't supposed to be that good. Lamashtu is the creature that takes away your child and steals its breath and all these things, and you have to put Pazuzu up, which is a demon that you don't deify. This isn't demon worship. This is to scare her ass off, much like a gargoyle. Again, we bounce off that. So, the Statue of Liberty says is made from Venusian element copper. It's also another figure that originates ultimately with the Inanna and Ishtar type that rules Venus. Inanna is known widely, but more specifically by the Babylonian Ishtar as the goddess of love and war. This is also Inanna, or Diana, in the Greeks. She was the goddess of love, turned the goddess of war. It's all the same thing. I've told you before, this all connects like a web. The Greek gods weren't necessarily gods of Greece, and the Greek people weren't really from there earlier. We'll get into that later too, but there were some, there were more. It comes out quite unique. Once you get it and then you can wrap your head around it and put it all together, it becomes quite, you're like, oh my, oh, duh. Okay, and in fact, Les and I were talking about something that goes along with this, and I was trying to lead him into a conversation about it, and he said he forgot the conversation. It doesn't matter. We'll get back into that conversation in another video. Taking all this into consideration, not surprising that Okami and Makido are the principal deities of Tubaki, or the Grand Shrine of America. It should be noted that the Ninzu Shinto is not in any way affiliated with the Tabaki Grand Shrine of America, which practices Jinja Shinto. Let me get a drink of coffee here, people. I'm not even talking good yet. Let that kick in. It'll be a minute or two. Now, Jinja is a jinn, and jinn, as we know from Persian and places like that, are these genies, as we know of them, like I Dream of Genie. They can grant you 3 wishes, and of course we have that with the symbol of Solomon, where he only asks for 1 wish to become the wisest person in the world, but he gets given the 3 things anyhow, and so it fulfills it, and he's complete. Then the first thing that he does is build shrines and temples to other gods, but that's neither here nor there on this one either. I just keep bouncing little things in here, but that's what I do. The land of the rising sun. Another similarity between the Sumerians and the ancient Shinto gnosis is the location of Dilmun. While Dilmun is associated with the ancient sites on the islands of Bahrain in the Persian Gulf, and this is one of the sacred places they have there. They say there's no bad animals or anything. It's a perfect place, and he makes a garden. This is where they also supposedly create human beings and stuff too. So, huh? Okay, well, here we go. The Cradle of Civilization is what it's called too. The author feels that this is not the original Dilmun, but worked much in the same way as places in the United States were named after places in England. I guess he's talking about like New Jersey and everything else, and he's saying that because they say it went to the land of the East, that it has to be there. Now, of course, the Sumerians, and you know we have attachments easily to go into the Hindu religion and Shiva and all these things that work in with it, and you can tell it's the same thing. And of course, they had ancient Aryans that had to do with this, and these Sumerians had to do with this also. So it goes through, but does it reach all the way up into China and Shinto? Well, we found mummies up there and everything, and of course these pyramids they won't let you get into, that a lot of them predate their existence in the area, but we don't get to look at those. In fact, if you'll check into it, you'll find they have covered them up with dirt and turned them into mounds in quite a few situations and have planted things on them, so maybe we don't see them with satellites and get so interested in them and stuff. It's kind of an odd thing, but so Dilmun sometimes is described as a place where the sun rises. It's the land of the living, but it's also the land of the prosperity of dead. And whenever I do my other next Dilmun video that I'll show you this area there that has hundreds of thousands of grave mounds all around into it. I'd like to see somebody get into a few of those and see what's going on, but that's another touchy subject for the people that are there. Now, this is the scene of the Sumerian creation myth, is in Dilmun, and as I told you just a moment ago, and it's also the place where they deified the Sumerian hero of the flood, Ziusudra, or Utnapishtim. He was taken by the gods to live there forever. Now, in another form of the story, you could take conjecture and say that he doesn't live there. He lives where the sun comes up at, through those two mountains, and you have to keep going. And of course, if you keep chasing the sun, you'll never catch it, right? Because it's going around like a ball. But the idea they tell you in one of the stories is that he has to go across a great band of water. So if he comes all the way into this and he reaches a great band of water before he goes to it, is this just going out to the island of Dilmun? Or is this going to the east and actually going across the water? Because if you go all the way to the east and then you go across the water, you end up in America. You end up in South America, and you end up on the far side of South America. Right where I've shown you before, there are Babylonian things and proof that they have an existence there. Reed boats, all the things that go with Sumerians and some of the Egyptian stuff, which comes from there. That's where the concept of reed boats comes from, is all attaching to that. Wasn't too long ago I did the video on that, actually two of them, but now, Ziusudra, of course, he was taken by the gods, and that he tells you he was taken by the gods, and it wasn't in the Middle East. Now, the Yi Jing Apocrypha of Genghis Khan covers this subject heavily in its introductions. Quest of the Dragon and Bird Clan by Paul Kakia Manasala makes an interesting point about the Mesopotamian legendary city of Dilmun. Mansala writes on page 48, the entrance to both the underworld and the sky world was found on Mount Mashu in Dilmun. In the sea of the rising sun, Enki would send fish-bearing sages known as Abgal, or the Apkallu. Now these Apkallu, in my upcoming video, I'll show you somebody even going to them and their forms of divination that they had. But these are also those fish-headed priests that you keep seeing. These are Owanas. Now Owanas brings you the knowledge. He's the knowledge bringer, but they show these guys and they're wearing these fish carp things, and it makes you wonder why and stuff. And it's not, I think it's all taken out of context. These people had scale armor on, which looks just like those fish scales. And in that fact, they would come and do this prophecy for these people, but then again, it was already decided upon before they ever got there what they were going to tell them they needed to do. You understand that, right? So here we have the Owanas getting attached to them, and I tell you, Owanas is Johannes, because there wasn't a J before the 1300s, and Johannes is John. And these water and this baptism ceremony that Enki used to have as being a water god, and baptism itself, and this John the Baptist is Ohanas, the baptizer, and Ohanas the baptizer is Oannes, the Sumerian Apkallu. Right? So, interesting connection there. Now, he says if Fu Shi was one of the Apkallu, which the evidence does point to him as being, then he came from Dilmun. Dilmun is described very much like an area existing in the vicinity of Japan, which seems to be a reference to the Empire of Mu, located around the Pacific Ocean. He tells you in the last part of it that it reaches, they designate it from Tigris-Euphrates all the way through to there, that this was the land of Mu. So they encompass that and they know of it. So Michael Rice, in a book entitled Egypt's Making, The Origins of Ancient Egypt, 5000-2000 BC, states that in Sumerian texts which celebrate Dilmun, various epithets are customarily attached to it, which is represented as a paradisal place where the gods dwelt, in which numerous acts of creation took place in a garden. It is called the land of the crossing, this is Nibiru, and the land where the sun rises, for the land is situated in the sea of the rising sun, and throughout its literature particularly emphasizes placed on Dilmun's purity, and how it doesn't have any bad animals and all that I was telling you about. In ancient Sumerian text, Dilmun is described as the land where the sun rises, which is situated in the sea of the rising sun, and it's described by the Sumerians like a mountain of Nazir among the Chaldeans, in the same way as a land where the gods dwelt in a place of creation. This doesn't discount that there may have been a Dilmun of later ages near the region of ancient Mesopotamia, which he's trying to say, oh, maybe there was one there. No, Dilmun is there. Maybe, just as you stated in the last statement, somebody came from Dilmun. But let's continue. However, the paradisal place of Dilmun where the gods dwelt seemed to point to the Empire of Mu, located on the region of Japan, if you use the, catch the rising sun situation. If this is the case, then evidence of such should be also to exist in Eastern, and more specifically ancient Japanese mythology. It's possible that the battle described in the Babylonian creation epic between Marduk and Tiamat may have been a battle between that occurred in the Empire of Mu over sovereignty. Well, I don't think so, but I think that looking into it, you could make, in a lot of times in wars and things that break down, you could be, oh, that's kind of like this, or it's kind of like that. Kind of like hearing a song that reminds you of another one, but it's not the same thing. But then that does show you some type of variation on a theme, and that they're all playing this same song, or they're on the same album at least. We consider everything that we have discussed so far. It seems very probable that Dilmun was located in what we call Japan today. No, it was in Dilmun, but they had one in Japan that mimicked the same thing. Since 1978, the Japan Petroglyph Society have found no less than 3,000 rocks with engravings throughout Japanese islands, documented by government education and culture boards of education. Now, what's interesting about all these is that petroglyphs found in these rocks can only be ciphered using Sumerian language. Ding. Expedition Magazine reports, it is to be noted that most of these 3,000 engraved rocks are located in the precincts of the summits of sacred hills, which have been worshipped by the native inhabitants probably since prehistoric ages, when everybody had these hill or mountain gods. They're in the Bible like crazy. Got to be on a mountain. I'm the god of the mountain. And people are like, oh, that's not the same. The engraved stone tablets are shown in photographs above were excavated at one of the sanctuaries in Okinawa, and we are kept at the Government Museum of Okinawa Prefecture, where since prehistoric ages about 12,000 BP to around 6,500 BP, Sobata sea people. The sea people, Sobata also is a Sumerian word, used to dwell and build peculiar Okinawan cultures. As seen in the pictures, two big birds are engraved at the top of the buildings, perhaps ancient types of shrines, and at the lower part of each building, and the right stone tablet in the lower right, or known as the foundation stone, is a pyramid engraved. These will show a characteristic of Japanese petroglyphs on their religious sides, because even today in Okinawa, native sea people have sincere faith and pious belief in the legendary homeland of Nidai Kanai, which is believed to have been located in a very far place in the ocean where their ancestors lived happy life forever. Now, is this out in the islands, or is this Canaanites, or is this, where is this? Or is this, like you talked about, where it's New York? Some scholars suppose that their legendary homeland must be the lost, sunken continent of Mu. We don't know exactly where or when the continent of Mu sank, but according to the undersea archaeological, some kind of geological catastrophe must have happened around 12,000 BC. So he pegs this to people just like I did. So many people are pegging this. This is when the flood happens of one form, where the sea rises real quick, along with a catastrophe of a bunch of giant tsunamis. But it's not like the biblical thing where you think it goes up over the mountains and stuff. There's no way to get that much water on the planet and then make it go away. In the Sumerian accounts, it gets 15 foot deep or whatever, or 15 cubits deep. In the biblical account, it does too. And then right after that, then they say it goes over the mountains. If you take out that sentence, it's the Sumerian account, along with everything else about the flood, releasing the doves and the raven, and one comes back with mud on his feet, and they know that there's land and everything, and da-da-da. So these 12 stone tablets kept at the governmental museum, 12 tablets, will provide us clues to solve the enigmatic origins of the human letters and languages. Another characteristic of the Japanese petroglyphs is that 30% of them could be deciphered with Proto-Sumerian and Sumerian cuneiform. We do not know exactly why Japanese petroglyphs are related with Sumerian letters. I think we do. We're talking about it here. The only thing we could suppose is that the late prehistoric ages Sumerian seafaring tribes, threatened by Akkadians' invasions, fled to the seas. Some tribes reached prehistoric Japan, which the scholars who belong to the Epigraphic Society of Harvard University used to suggest that the ISAC or ES conference. Emeritus Professor Barry Fell, hey, I know Barry, the late president of the ES, was an outstanding leader of the theory, adding that he is sure the Sumerian seafaring people reached the Far East while other groups reached the Americas in the BC. Ding! Shown below are exact examples of petroglyphs which could be deciphered using the Sumerian language. Well, I'm not going to show those to you, it's just saying it here. These petroglyphs, which feature some characteristics similar to Vash language and the engraved stone tablets known in petroglyphs, were excavated at the one sanctuaries in Okinawa, are kept in the Government Museum of Okinawa Prefecture, where their since prehistoric age is about 12,000 BC to 6,500 BC. Interestingly, the article reveals that 30% of these petroglyphs could be deciphered by use of Proto-Sumerian. This shows us that the older relationships between the Sumerians exist in what is called Japan today than the recent Dilmun. Well, no, you'd say it's there, then it was here. Well, were they somewhere in Mu and then they came to Sumeria and others went there? I don't think so. I think when the disaster happened, they went. It seems to be much more closer, a more recent thing than the 12,000 Dil, or was it proto to that even? It's almost one or the other, but not exactly on like he's saying if you look into it deeply. Now, there's also ancient stories of titans always, and these titans have wars between the elder gods, and the information cited in this section is taken from the Yajing Apocrypha of Genghis Khan. The Babylonian creation myth is quite different from the Sumerian account of creation. In Sumerian original mythology, it's Namu who gave birth to the first gods and comes up with the idea of creating human beings with the help of Enki. Enki uses his sister and makes them. In the Babylonian mythology, the god Enki attacks the primordial god Apsu after discovering his plot to kill the younger gods for making too much noise. Now, this is echoed in the very first time with Sumerians, and I told you about the flood story, where Enlil thought everybody was making too much noise and he wanted to kill everybody off, right? Now, this is followed by a battle between the older and younger gods. Marduk, the son of Ea, is chosen by the younger gods to fight against the older gods. So, ironically, these people that had a one way of doing things is led into this titanomancy, right? by someone else. Or isn't it strange that all three, or actually four of these cultures, I mean, definitely if you look into the Egyptians, it changes through time, and then there's Seti and Seth, the red-headed god with the blue eyes, but I digress. But they wanted to kill him for making too much noise. Now the son of Marduk, Marduk is the son of the god Ea, and he is chosen by the younger gods to fight against the older gods. Marduk defeats the primal gods, the Titans, Kingu, and then Tiamat. Now, Kingu was killed and its head falls, and it says he forever faces Ki, which is earth, in reverence. And people have never tried to figure out what the hell is that here. That's the man in the moon. That's Apollo. And if you notice, the moon always faces us. It never turns away and stuff, and it's gone pale. This is when he got his head cut off and da-da-da. And this is a whole another zodiacal symbology here, attaching it to people and when something had happened. And then Tiamat, and of course Tiamat's half of her body is pushed up and it makes the firmament and all this, but that's already happened way before. In fact, that Sumerian account that I talked to you about recently, where it says that they witnessed God being done, and they go, well, all this stuff's already here. Maybe that's an inclination of when Marduk took over and he says all these decrees, and they go, this is already here. Maybe that's more what that really was. Anyhow, due to the differences found in their perspective and creation myths, we can see that the Sumerians were different people than the Babylonians, the later Babylonians. You know, it's Sumerian, then Akkadian, then Babylonian. While they had that feeling, they didn't quite have it. And it's due to the difference found in their perspectives on creation myths. And you can tell one directly stole from the other, and I showed you where the Bible directly stole from both of them. While many have theorized that the Babylonian creation myth was more about promoting Marduk, and that's what it is, as the supreme god of ancient Mesopotamia, it may very well be possible that these events recorded in this particular mythology reflect a conflict and a descent occurring in the prehistorical empire of Mu. He keeps trying to pull it to that, but it shows you there's a connection there. I think it may be a little slighter than he thinks, but that's okay. The idea of a younger god rebelling against an older one does occur in the ancient mythologies of Japan too, specifically between Amaterasu Omikami and her younger brother Susanoo. Now Susanoo is his name. It's broken down better than that. Nomikito. The rivalry between Amaterasu and Omikami, notice that Om, like ohms, and her younger brother Susanoo is a very popular Shinto myth. Susanoo bears a striking resemblance to the Babylonian god Ea. Both are associated with water and fertility. Susanoo is the god of the sea and a trickster deity. Ea is too. Ea is the god of water, among other things too. Now Susanoo, like the younger gods in the Babylonian creation myth, upset the older gods of making too much noise. In the case of the ancient Japanese mythology, however, we get an idea of what this noise symbolized. The Chronicles of Japan from the earliest times of AD in 697, translated by W.G. Aston, gives us this account concerning Susanoo. Their next child was Susanoo. This god had a fierce temper and was given to cruel acts, but moreover he was made a practice of continually weeping and wailing. So he'd get mad and out of hand and throw fits. So she brought many of the people of the land to an untimely end. Again, he caused green mountains to become withered. Therefore, the two gods, his parents, addressed Sosa, saying, Thou art exceedingly wicked, and it is not to meet that thou shouldst reign over the world. Certainly thou must depart far away from to the Netherlands. I guess that's going to be way to the south for these people, though, if you look into their stories. If we took Susanoo as the Babylonian Ea, we could understand that the noise which upset the older gods in the Babylonian creation myth was indeed the acts of malice and misuse of power. Now, in the original Sumerian, it was the Agigi and the people they had helped and the gods, and these were people that were like gods having to do all the work of trying to form the planet, as they try to say, and they threw fits, and then there was a big problem and a revolt. Now in the second telling of this, it becomes the people that they make, and they throw revolt, and he doesn't like it, and he smotes them all, and he starts causing diseases on them and all these other things, which, if you look at the order of them, is the same as Moses' crap after the snake deal. Anyhow, we look into this further and you find out that it's got far too many connections. Let me just go on here. Susanos association with the Babylonians is not an Ea or Enki, Ea, like Yah, or Ea, as in Era, Asher, Ea, maybe in the Bible too, huh? Ea is not an unfounded idea. In the Nihongi translated by Aston defines the name Susanu and says, Susanoo is therefore simply the male, or the dominant male, of Susa. Susa is an ancient city in